And here we go. Hello everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So now, guys, we're back to the vexatious topic of the Nigerian civil war again. So now, I came across this article by Obafemi Awolowo, which I wanted to share with you. It's a question and answer session that he had a while ago with a journalist. So let's just go through it. Let me not labor it too much. Let's just go through it. The title, My Role in the Nigerian Civil War by Obafemi Awolowo. So, like I said, a question and answer session where he speaks to just what his participation was in that space. So let's go just straight into it. Shortly before the 1983 presidential election, the late Chief Obafemi Awolowo fielded questions from a panel of journalists at a town hall meeting in Abeokuta. During the session, which was aired live on Ogun Radio, Awolowo defended his actions during the Civil War, countering allegations similar to the one Chinua Achebe leveled against him recently. So now we get into the question and answer session, and this is the question, at least the first question put by the journalist. Chief Awolowo, your stand on the Nigerian Civil War, however unpopular it may have been to the Biafrans, helped to shorten the war. Today, you are being cast as the sole enemy of the Igbo people because of that stand by, amongst others, some of the people who, as members of the federal military government at that time, were party to that decision and are today, in some cases, inheritors of power in one Nigeria, which that decision of yours helped to save. How do you feel being cast in this role? And what steps are you taking to endear yourself once again to the large chunk of Nigerians who feel embittered? So you have to remember, of course, that this is set against the backdrop of an electioneering campaign with Abulawa campaigning to be the president of Nigeria. So the question now, Awolowo's response. So this is Awolowo's response. As far as I know, the Igbo masses are friendly towards me. In fact, whenever I visit Igbo land, either Anambra or Imo, and there is no campaigning for election on, the Igbo people receive me warmly and affectionately. But there are some elements in Igbo land who believe that they can maintain their popularity only by denigrating me. And so they keep on telling lies against me. Ojuku is one of them. I don't want to mention the names of others because they're still redeemable, but Ojuku is irredeemable. So I mentioned his name, and my attitude to these lies is one of indifference, I must confess to you. I have learned to rely completely on the providence and vindication of Almighty God in some of these things. I have tried to explain myself in the past, but these liars persist. Ojuku had only recently told the same lie against me. What's the point in correcting lies when people are determined to persist in telling lies against you? What is the point? I know that someday the Igbos, the masses of the Igbo people, will realize who their friends are and who their real enemies are. And the day that happens, woe betide those enemies. The Igbos will deal with them roughly. So I have cultivated an attitude of indifference, and I have done no evil to the Igbos. During the war, I saw that the revenue which was due. So this is where he now so that part was the preamble. So this is now where he delves really deeply into the Biafran Igbo space and his role in that space. During the war, I saw that the revenue which was due to Igbo land, Southeast State, they call it at that time, East Central State, I kept it I saved the money for them, and when they were liberated, I handed over the money to them. Millions. If I had decided to do so, I could have kept the money away from them. And then when they took over, I saw to it that subventions was given to them at the rate of £990,000 every month. I didn't go to the executive council to ask for support or for approval because I knew if I went to the executive council at that time, the subvention would not have been approved because there were more enemies in the executive council for the Igbos than friends. And since I wasn't going to take a percentage from what I was going to give them, and I knew I was doing what was right, I wanted the states to survive. I kept on giving the subvention, 990,000, almost a million every month. And I did that for other states, of course, southeast states, north central states, Kwara, and so on. But I did that for the Igbos. And when the war was over, I saw to it that the ACD got £3.5 million to start with. This was distributed immediately, and I gave another sum of money. The attitude of the experts, officials at the time of the ACD was that the ACD should be closed down, and I held the view that you couldn't close the ACD down because that is the bank that give finances to Igbo traders. And if you close it down, they will find it difficult to revive or survive. So it was given. I did the same thing for the Cooperative Bank of Eastern Nigeria to rehabilitate all these places. And I saw to it, as Commissioner of Finance, that no obstacle was placed in the way of the Ministry of Economic Planning in planning for rehabilitation of the war-affected areas. So this is really documenting really what role Awolowo played in that space. So these are factual things, verifiable against the propaganda that some people will suggest are being leveled against him.
Let's pause now for some of the history behind this bloody war. It is said, though no one knows for sure, that 1 of every 4 black men on the African continent is a Nigerian. There were 55 million of them before the war. Nigeria was a creation of British colonialism. At the turn of the century, Britain carved out the richest area in West Africa, lumped together 250 tribes, each with its own culture, its own history, and arbitrarily called these people Nigerians. Of those tribes, 3 were dominant. The Hausas, most numerous, Muslims in the north, medieval, lagging behind the others in education and commerce. The Yorubas in the west, animists and Christians, the first educated. And the Igbos in the east, where Christianity is now strongest.
Some say the Igbos were the most backward, but in the last quarter century, with the aid of European missionary education, the Igbo overtook the others and became the most powerful economic group of all. But the Igbo also wanted political power. He resented the strength of the Hausas and Yorubas, who, since Nigerian independence in 1960, had run the country and grown corrupt. Riding a wave of popular discontent, Igbo and other military officers in 1966 succeeded in a coup d'etat. They executed key non-Igbo politicians and several of the top non-Igbo military officers. For a while, it seemed the country applauded the coup. But once in power, this new Igbo-dominated government was felt to be guilty of the same corruption as the previous government. Additionally, Igbo merchants and civil servants all over Nigeria began showing a newfound arrogance and sense of superiority, building a resentment that culminated in a wave of terror against the Igbo. Estimates of the number of Igbo massacred in northern Nigeria range from 7,000 to 30,000. Surviving Igbos abandoned their homes and businesses. Millions of them fled to the Igbo heartland in the east. There, led by the charismatic Ojukwu, army officer, son of a wealthy Igbo family, they seceded, proclaiming Biafra an independent nation. To begin with, Biafra claimed this corner of Nigeria, which included territory containing several minority tribes, some of whom did not support the Igbo cause.
Following Biafra's secession in 1967, Nigeria invaded from the north. Biafra struck back across its own boundaries, conquered and held for a while territory in federal Nigeria. But in 2 years of war, federal Nigerian troops have whittled down Biafra from over 50,000 square miles to little more than 3,000. The fighting in this war is sporadic. There are few fixed military positions, no real front lines, many hit-and-run raids by both sides, and an occasional big battle for a city or a road junction.
This is Nkwalo Junction, right now about 3 miles behind the furthest advance of Biafran troops to the south. There was heavy fighting here in early May as the Biafrans retook the town. Nkwalo Junction is 25 miles from Port Harcourt, a major seaport and refinery city the Biafrans want back. The Biafran troops we found at this road junction were a ragtag collection, looking more like irregulars than the frontline soldiers of the 14th Division, who are currently engaged in Biafra's most successful offensive of the war. How the Biafran army succeeds, armed as it is with an odd-lot collection of weapons, is a puzzle. Some at the front carry communist-made AK-47s, like those used by the Viet Cong. Some only World War I bolt-action antiques. Others modern British semi-automatics. And their pride and heaviest weapon, a .30 caliber machine gun just captured from the Nigerians. Much, in fact, of what the Biafrans are now using against the Nigerians, they have taken from them. One military man up here told me, not totally as a joke, that Biafra now looks upon the Nigerian army as its quartermaster general. And if the Nigerian army runs on beer and bullets, the Biafran army lacks both, with ammunition constantly in critically short supply. These troops had advanced 6 miles in less than a week. Then, practically out of ammunition, were forced to stop on the road to Port Harcourt until more supplies trickled down to them. One of this army's other problems is staying large enough to continue the fight against Nigerians. When Biafra seceded in 1967, it had fewer than 1,000 men under arms, and those mostly officers and clerks. Now it has been built up to between 45 and 60,000. The exact number, a military secret. Volunteers made the original army buildup easy. Now conscription of virtually all able-bodied young men is underway. And in a former school compound, we found recruits drilling, marching in the mud to the improbable tune of Margie. These new soldiers are also taught the rudiments of jungle warfare and ambush, to be used against an enemy which holds most of Biafra's major cities, several vital road links, but not too much of the countryside. The training is basic, but effective.
They're going to stab us right by the shoulder here, and we want to defend it. Go.
And here I met a young trooper, a very young trooper in the Biafran army. How old are you?
I'm 10 years.
10 years old.
Yes.
Do you know why Biafra is fighting?
The Biafra is fighting for survival.
Is it going to win?
Yes.
He continues. So to the starvation policy, which is a high topic, space within that Biafran space. So the starvation policy. So it goes on. Then, but above all, the ending of the war itself that I am accused of starving the Igbos. I did nothing of the sort. You know, shortly after the liberation of these places, Calabar, Enugu, and Port Harcourt, I decided to pay a visit. There are certain things which I knew, which you don't know, which I don't want to say here now. When I write my reminiscences in the future, I will do so. Some of the soldiers were not truthful with us. They didn't tell us correct stories and so on. I wanted to be there and see things for myself. Bear in mind that Gowon himself did not go there at that time. It was after the war was over that he donned himself up in various military dresses, Air Force dress, army dress, and so on, and went to the war-torn areas. But I went, and some people tried to frighten me out of my goal by saying that Adekunle was my enemy and he was going to see to it that I never return from the place. But I went. But when I went, what did I see? I saw Kwashoko victims. If you see a Kwashoko victim, you will never like the war to be waged. Terrible sight in Enugu, in Port Harcourt, not many in Calabar, but many in Enugu and Port Harcourt. Then I inquired what happened to the food we were sending to the civilians. We were sending food through the Red Cross and the CARITAS to them. But what happened was that the vehicles carrying the food were always ambushed by soldiers. That's what I discovered. And the food would then be taken to the soldiers to feed them. And so they were able to continue to fight. And I said that was a dangerous policy. We didn't intend to feed the soldiers, but who will go behind the line to stop the soldiers from ambushing the vehicles that were carrying food? And as long as soldiers were fed, the war would continue. And who will continue to suffer? And those who did not go to the place to see things as I did, you remember that all the big guns, all the soldiers in the Biafran army looked all well fed after the war. It is only the masses of the people that suffered kwashoko. You won't hear a single lawyer, a single doctor, a single architect who suffered from kwashoko. None of their children either. So they waylaid the food, they ambushed the vehicles, and took the food to their friends and to their collaborators and to their children, and the masses were suffering. So I decided to stop sending the food there. In the process, the civilians would suffer, but the soldiers will suffer most. So that's the controversial food space. Then I'm not entirely sure that that is a decision that he should have made, because it needs to get the food there, irrespective of what the soldiers, just to insert my personal opinion, what they should have done was to find a way to parachute the food into the people, because you cannot starve the people in order to prevent the soldiers from getting fat and continue to fight. But maybe that was a misdirected policy position. Tell me your thoughts in the comment section. But it continues. And so he goes on to the next subtopic, change of currency. Um, and it is on record that Ojukwu admitted that two things defeated him in this war. That as at the day he left Biafra, he said one, the change of currency. He said that was the first thing that defeated him. We discovered that he looted our central bank in Benin. He looted the one in Port Harcourt, looted the one in Calabar, and he was taking the currency notes abroad to sell to earn foreign currencies to buy arms. So I decided to change the currency, and for your benefit, it can now be told the whole world. Only Gowon knew the day before the change took place. I decided only 3 of us knew before then. It was a closely guarded secret. If any commissioner at the time said that he knew about it, he is only boosting his own ego. Because once you tell someone, he'll tell another person. So we refused to tell them, and we changed the currency note. So Ojukwu said the change in currency defeated him, and starvation of his soldiers also defeated him. These were the two things that defeated Ojukwu, and he reminds me, when you saw Ojukwu's picture after the war, did he look like someone who is not well fed, but he has been taking food which we sent to civilians, and so we stopped the food. So we go on then to the final subheading, which is the abandoned properties. So to the abandoned properties. So this is Awolowo now in the course of electioneering in the early 80s, being put the question of the Nigerian Civil War, and it then opened up on that space. So abandoned properties. And then finally, I saw to it that the houses owned by the Igbos in Lagos and on this side were kept for them. I had an estate agent friend who told me that one of them collected £500,000 rent, which has been kept for him. All his rent were collected, but since we didn't seize their houses, he came back and collected £500,000. So that is the position. I am a friend of the Igbos, and the mass of the Igbos are my friend. But there are certain elements who want to continue to deceive Igbos by telling lies about me. One day they will discover, and then that day will be terrible for those who have been telling lies about me. So that is Awolowo now giving his documentation of that controversial historical space within the Nigerian journey. So that's Awolowo's take on the civil war space. So a lot of things to take from there, but and by the way, what I think he has tried to do was to document as factually as he can what he feels went on in that space. But then, of course, history always has two sides: the history as told by the victor, and the history as understood by the vanquished. So, come share thoughts about all this with me in the comment section. So, I'll leave it here. Carry the conversation on with you in the comment section. But here, I say, peace.